Shabbat Shalom. It's good to see all of you. We have guests here today, some 40 senior officials of the Israel National Defense College. Amazing people, the best of the best who are taking some time off from their command responsibilities to study in that elite Israeli institution, educating those who will one day be leading Israel's defense establishment. The school is often compared to West Point, but frankly, having studied in Israel myself, nothing can compare to Israeli schools, for good and for bad. Bruchim habayim. Welcome. Anu geim bachem v'tomchim bachem. We're proud of you, and we support you, and affirm the common ties of history and destiny. You are among family here. We do not only see you as soldiers, we see you as brothers and sisters and friends. And we thank the Consulate of Israel who asked our synagogue to host the INDC officers in this, their one Shabbat experience in the United States. And we welcome the Deputy Consul General Shlomi Kaufman. Efata? Welcome. We are not a war-loving people. Jewish tradition insists on peace, where all shall sit under their vines and fig trees, and none shall be afraid, where weapons of war are converted into instruments of peace and prosperity. But we are not suicidal either. We look across the border and witness the savagery of Syrians butchering one another as the world watches casually and mindful of the bloodletting and the blood-curdling threats of many of Israel's neighbors. We think to ourselves, if it weren't for this remarkable military, the Israel Defense Forces, what would those people who are so merciless on one another, what would they do to us if they only had the chance? Defense, the preservation of life, is a sacred moral value. And when it comes to the hard and often thankless and morally complicated work of defense, we look to those who have special attributes: courage, daring, charisma, leadership qualities, intuitive and creative brilliance, willingness to sacrifice and even pay the highest price for the defense of life. And these too are high and noble attributes. These are the attributes represented tonight in our congregation. And it is gratifying and good for us, Lashevet Achim Gam Yachad, for sisters and brothers to spend Shabbat together and to ponder what it is that binds us one to the other. It seems to me that this occasion calls for a simple celebration of our Zionist commitment. Let us leave the hard politics aside for one Shabbat and take a moment to remind ourselves of the ties that bind. From its very first day, 106 years ago, this synagogue has embodied one idea over and above all others: the centrality and unity of the Jewish people. Rabbi Wise asserted it then, and we assert it today. It is an enormous and unique idea. We let this idea roll off our tongues too casually. We have become dulled to its true relevance. It has become a mere slogan for us, a tagline that we add whenever we're trying to raise money for Jews overseas. But the centrality and the unity of the Jewish people is the key principle of Judaism. We are a people first and foremost. Judaism is the faith of the Jewish people. We are a small people, only 14 million of us, within a world population of 7 billion. We make a lot of noise, but we are only 0.2% of humanity, a rounding error, a statistical mistake. One wonders why all the fuss that others create? Why so much fuss about us? Why they are so eager to point out our flaws from among all of the monumental flaws of the world at large? And we act like a small people, a family. It often happens to me that when I go to Israel and someone hears that I live in New York City, they can say to me something like, "Oh, if you live in New York, you must know Shlomo. He lives there already for 3 years." I heard my grandmother once call the operator in Israel and ask for Moshe Levi in Tel Aviv. So the operator said, "Which Moshe Levi?" And she said, "You know, the Moshe Levi with the bad limp." A people must be aware not only of its flaws, a people must encourage not only a conversation of criticism, a people must also be aware of its greatness. It is our uncompromising loyalty to this fundamental idea, the centrality and the unity of the Jewish people, that more than anything else accounts for us still being here. 3,000 years later, when all of the other nations of antiquity are no more. Think of the miracle that there are even Jews in the world. Really. I mean, we live in Manhattan, and sometimes it seems like we might encounter too many Jews for our taste. And even Israelis sometimes go far, far away to the far, far east to rest from constant immersion amongst Jews. Okay. But think for a moment of the enormous blessing. You meet Babylonians in the Bowery? You meet Philistines on Fifth Avenue? Do you meet Moabites in Manhattan? Do you meet Midianites in Midtown? Do you meet Chaldeans in Chinatown? How about Nabateans? They built Petra. Do you meet Nabateans in NoHo? Have you seen a Hittite on the High Line? Have you met an Assyrian or an Amalekite on the Avenue of the Americas? Where are the Akkadians, the Sumerians, the Hyksos? Where are all of these nations of antiquity, many of whom are mentioned in our Bible as seeking to destroy us, and that is the only reason that anyone even remembers them today? They left nothing behind. No document, no village, no testament, nothing, except for our memory of their desire to kill us. And if it were not for our memory of them, no one would have even known that they ever existed. You can meet Jews in practically every corner of the universe. Where are the masters of the universe? Those empires that were destined to rule forever. We are all preoccupied now with the Boston Marathon. The very name marathon commemorates the ancient Greek runner who, legend tells us, ran from Marathon to Athens to inform the assembly that the Greeks had just defeated the Persians in the Battle of Marathon. Where are the Persians today? That empire that was destined to rule forever. Where are the Greeks today? And by this I mean not those currently residing in Athens practicing Christianity and speaking a new dialect, but the descendants of Alexander the Great, who worshipped Zeus, Apollo, and Poseidon. Where are the Romans today? And by this I mean not those currently residing on the banks of the Tiber speaking Italian, but the descendants of Titus, who destroyed the second temple of the Jews and gave homage to Mars and Jupiter, Venus, and Neptune. When you say, "I am Jewish," can you grasp the enormity of that simple proposition? When you even say the words, Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, can you even comprehend how miraculous, how unexpected, how unprecedented in the entire annals of civilization that one phrase is? And if all that Israel did was to save persecuted Jews, dayenu, that in and of itself would have been enough. But Israel does much more than simply provide a place of refuge for Jews who have nowhere else to go. Israel is the most eloquent expression of Jewish peoplehood in our days. It is one of the great wonders of the world. The recreation and restoration of the national home and the national spirit of the Jewish people. But that central idea that the Jews are first and foremost a family, this founding principle of Judaism is under attack today. It's under attack politically and militarily by all kinds of opponents and enemies who dislike us for one reason or another. But you know what? I trust the Israelis in the room and their friends to take care of that business. But even more important, it is under attack intellectually and philosophically in the great academies of Western civilization. It is under attack internally within the Jewish community itself. And I'm not sure whether we, the other people in this room, can deal with this threat adequately enough. Both Jewish and non-Jewish critics contend that the very idea of Jewish peoplehood is anachronistic in our Enlightenment, reason, equality, and fraternity era. And therefore, they contend that the very notion of a Jewish state is contrary to the spirit of the age. It is a product of 19th century nationalism imposed on a 21st century reality. We should have discarded these attributes of Jewish ethnicity, Jewish unity, and Jewish particularity long ago in favor of the universal dream of the common destiny of humanity. They don't say that about others. The British people can speak lovingly of the rolling hills of England. The French people can speak romantically about the sun-kissed fields of Provence. The German people can be intoxicated by the mystique of Bavaria. But somehow when the Jews speak fondly of the promised land, it is for many ipso facto evidence of anachronistic thinking at best, and at worst, a form of racism. It's not that the Jews are unconcerned about humanity at large. It was our tradition, our Bible, our prophets, who first articulated and still inspire the principle of universal brotherhood and peace. ואברהם יהיה לגוי גדול ונברכו בו כל משפחות האדמה. כי ידעתיו למען אשר יצווה את בניו ואת ביתו אחריו לעשות צדקה ומשפט. Behold, I have singled Abraham out so that he will do what is just and right, and all the peoples of the world shall be blessed through him. The raison d'etre of the Jewish people is tikkun, repair. But we believe that the path to universalism lies through the collective efforts of peoples and nations. The collectivity is the key force of history, not individuals. And that's the reason that Israel's creation carries such universal significance. It is a triumph of the human spirit. It inspired an entire people to awaken from its national passivity and to seize its own destiny. As such, Israel says to all persecuted, oppressed, and demoralized people, you can do it too. Lift up the banner of freedom and restore yourself. And so Israel embodies and represents a modern, liberal, and progressive cause. It is an ever young and ever relevant cause, the cause of freedom, self-realization, and self-determination, dignity, and enlightenment in a very dark region of the world. And it is our obligation to tell this story. It is a story about how the promised land became a land of promise. Israel represents hope. The return of the Jews to Zion is a miracle of biblical proportions, the likes of which have not been seen in the whole annals of civilization. Our people has raised Zion from desolation and made it live again. Et hazamir higia v'kol hator nishma b'artzenu. The time for singing has come, and the song of the turtle dove is heard throughout the land. The green figs weigh heavy on the fig trees. The vines in blossom give off their fragrance. Ve'itifu he'arim asis v'chol hagvaot titmogagna. The mountains drip wine, and the hills wave with grain. As you may recall, some 30 members of this congregation traveled to Eastern Europe last summer, and we spent a morning in Auschwitz. I had heard and read about practically everything we saw and were told at Auschwitz, except one thing that stood out for me, and I have been unable to forget it. Our guide showed us the home of Rudolf Hess, the Nazi commandant of the camp, described by people who knew him as an ordinary little man who simply carried out his bureaucratic duties to the best of his ability, and his bureaucratic skills made him history's most murderous executioner. His house was adjacent to the courtyard where mass hangings occurred and not far from one of the crematoria. And what struck me especially hard was this. Did you know that there is a Polish family that lives in that house? The house had been built by a Polish man before the Nazi invasion. And after the war, he wanted it back. He lived there for 20 years, eventually selling it to the ancestors of the family that lives there now. People have lived in Rudolf Hess's house, the house inside Auschwitz, the house that overlooks the crematorium, since 1947. The blood was still fresh. Me asita kol dmei achicha tzoakim alai min ha'adama. What have you done? The blood was still crying out from the depths of the earth. And I thought to myself, in the end, life moves on. Your tragedies are your tragedies. But others, they get on with life. Many thousands of visitors a day visit those 50 acres inside Auschwitz I, but there are people who live around Auschwitz and even inside the house of the most sinister executioner in history, and they live normal lives there. They have families there. They raise children. They have pets. They have satellite television. Your tragedy is not their tragedy. They live as if nothing happened there. The owners of that house talk about the beauty of the gardens. In the end, Jewish history is our history. If Israel were to ever lose a war, there would be many headlines, many books would be published, many people would express real and sincere sadness, some would weep, a few would repent. But in the end, they would move on. We would be left with a tragedy. To this day, 2,000 years later, we Jews still mourn the destruction of the temple by the Romans. For everyone else, it is a small piece of history, if they are even aware of it at all. For us, after 2 millennia, it is still an open wound. It will never fully heal. So in the end, Jewish history is our history. Jewish history is our responsibility. Jewish destiny is our responsibility. Jewish life is our responsibility. And the Jewish state is our responsibility. Netzach Yisrael lo yeshaker. The Jewish people lives. May we prove worthy, and may we endure now and forever.